Today's topic is work and its secret. This is a Vivekananda month, so we're focusing on his works and his life. So this is a topic on karma yoga. Why work? Why do we work? We work to educate ourselves, get a good job, hopefully one we enjoy, so we can settle down, buy a home, support a spouse and our children, manage to send our children to college, then one day retire. But by middle age, there's a strong pull for retirement, even to retire early, so we can enjoy life, our friends, our family, our grandchildren. We can travel. But often old age and illness set in, and we find our medical bills mounting, eating away at our retirement fund. Swami Vivekananda tells us, we are caught, though we came to catch. We came to enjoy. We are being enjoyed. We came to rule. We're being ruled. We came to work. We're being worked. We are being worked upon by other minds, and we are always struggling to work on other minds. We want to enjoy the pleasures of life, and they eat into our vitals. We want to get everything from nature, but we find in the long run that nature takes everything from us, depletes us, and casts us aside. So what's the answer? Again, Vivekananda, he says one of the greatest lessons I have learned in my life is to pay as much attention to the means of work as to its end. In other words, so much of our life is spent in working towards a goal outside of ourselves, goals which are impermanent or elude us. The result? That a large part of our life is overlooked in the outward doing of things, and we fail to take heed of our manner of doing, the heart of work itself. Karma yoga is the path of harnessing action to awaken our insight and deepen our interior life, our self-development. We can use work as our face-to-face teacher when we ourselves become the teacher, and we can observe how it reflects our attitude toward our very self. We can use work to tap into this avenue of self-awareness to slowly refine, purify, and remodel our mind and sense of self. And in the process, perfect our work itself. This is karma yoga, the interior process that gradually elevates our karma into yoga, and in the process diminishes our lower self and thus unveils our higher self. It's a noble, noble path, a noble yoga. So what is the difference, we might ask, between karma and karma yoga? The definition of karma is action, both mental and physical, and also the result of action, but also even further, the sum total of actions in this present and past lives. Vivekananda tells us we are all doing karma all the time. I'm talking to you, that is karma. You're listening, that is karma. We breathe, that is karma. We walk, karma. Everything we do, physical or mental, is karma and leaves its mark on us. So then what is the difference between karma, action, and karma yoga, the yoga of action? Outwardly, they may appear to be the same. The difference is in the mind. Karma is everything we do, physical or mental. Karma yoga is in the mind. It's not about doing things. Karma yoga is the method of transforming ourself. The secret? Vivekananda. If what we are now has been the result of our own past action, it certainly follows that whatever we wish to be in the future can be produced by our present actions. So we have to know how to act. So how do we transform karma into karma yoga? We must first understand that bondage is attachment. And the cause of bondage is selfishness or self-centeredness arising out of our own ignorance. The goal is freedom, self-realization. So we must be convinced, first of all, that we have a body and we have a mind, but we are not the body and we are not the mind. Yet the body and mind have such a hold over all of us. Every day, every minute of our day, we misidentify ourselves. The secret? We must give up what is not ours. It sounds simple, but essentially it means to stop misidentifying. Misidentifying this I with what we are not, the outer sheaths of the body-mind complex, and what we do. Sri Krishna tells us in the second chapter of the Gita, verse 47, you have the right to work, but for work's sake only. You have no right to the fruits of work. Desire, he says, for the fruits of work must never be your motive in working. And yet they are. They creep into our every action. But with each selfish act, we deliberately renounce such notions as I'm a good house cleaner, an accomplished scientist, a popular teacher, a generous philanthropist, that sully and cover up our pure mind with pride and accomplishment, and allow our phantom ego to thicken its insidious veil around our true self. It happens to all of us. Once when I asked my teacher, Swami Pravrajika, who was a disciple of Swami Brahmananda, what is the secret of karma yoga? His answer came swiftly and directly. Don't work for yourself. And the way he uttered yourself, it was with such utter disgust that I never forgot how base exposed the ego next to the ideal. So if self-knowledge is our goal, selfless work removes the covering of ignorance that veils our nature. It's a mistake to feel that we're doing good to society. Rather, we must feel it's a privilege to serve others. That is the attitude that sets us free. We should always cultivate a charitable view towards those also who reap bad karma. During our past lives, we also committed wrongdoing and experienced suffering. That suffering led us to this point in our lives. Brahman also, we must know, dwells within this world. So our attitude should not be, I will save the world, but rather, Om Purnamida Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamideva Vishishate. Filled with Brahman are the things we see. Filled with Brahman are the things we see not. From out of Brahman floweth all that is, yet is he still the same. So Brahman is with us all the time. We just don't realize it. In this relative world, there will always be good and evil. But through karma yoga, we can purify our mind and thus transcend the pairs of opposites. Yes, it's possible through karma yoga alone. That is how the knowledge of Brahman dawns. But like Sri Krishna, Swami Vivekananda advocated, karma yoga is not just a path of purification, which is what the Shankara, many of the Shankara order Dasanami say it is. It can lead to illumination, and that is why our order is quite revolutionary in the Shankara Dasanami. Sri Krishna says in the Gita, 6th chapter, verse 3, let him who would climb in meditation to heights of the highest union with Brahman take for his path the yoga of action. Then when he nears that height of oneness, his acts will fall from him, his path will be tranquil. Swami Brahmananda, disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, explains the karma yoga that was put into motion by Swami Vivekananda. In the Gita, he says, Sri Krishna says that it is possible to attain liberation through work only. But in order to achieve this, one must have intense renunciation. All mental, physical, and spiritual energies must be fully concentrated. Then only can you reach God. There's a beautiful example of this that comes to mind, recorded by Madame Emma Calvé, who was a close companion of Swami Vivekananda. In the 1890s, Vivekananda stayed in Chicago with a business associate of John D. Rockefeller. John D. had heard about this extraordinary Hindu monk staying with his friends. And he was invited to meet Vivekananda, but he always refused. Rockefeller was not yet at the peak of his fortune, but he was powerful, strong-willed, difficult to handle, and a hard man to advise. One day, inexplicably, he was impelled to go to his friend's house. He knocked on the door of the mansion, and the butler answered, and he brushed aside the butler and entered and stated he wanted to see the Hindu monk. The butler ushered him into the living room, but Rockefeller then went into Vivekananda's adjoining study unannounced. Swami Vivekananda was seated behind his writing table. He didn't lift his eyes to see who had entered. Vivekananda then proceeded to tell John D. of his past, unknown to any but himself. And he made him understand that the money he had accumulated was not his. He was only a channel. His duty was to do good to the world. He went on that God had given him wealth for the opportunity to help and do good to people. Rockefeller was annoyed. How dare the Swami tell him what to do? He left the room without saying goodbye. But a week later, he returned, unannounced, again brushed aside the butler, and entered Vivekananda's study. Again, Vivekananda didn't look up. John D. threw on his desk plans, enormous donation to finance a public institution. And John D. then said, well, there you are. You must be satisfied now, and so you can thank me. Vivekananda didn't lift his eyes, nor did he move. He then took the paper, quietly read it, and said, it is for you to thank me. That was all. Rockefeller's first large donation to public welfare. Years later, Rockefeller explained the reason behind his monumental philanthropies, echoing Vivekananda. He said there is more to life than the accumulation of money. Money is only a trust in one's hands. To use it improperly is a great sin. The best way to prepare for the end of life is to live for others. That is what I'm trying to do. Vivekananda inspires endurance. He says the karma yogi asks why you require any motive to work other than the inborn love of freedom. Be beyond the common worldly motives, he tells us. Then he explains the yogic dimension, the how. And really, karma yoga, as he later stated, was his greatest work. And it's one of the four pillars of Vedanta: Bhakti Yoga, Karma Yoga, Raja Yoga, Jnana Yoga. And they're there on our bookshelf. Unselfish action brings power. It allows us to step aside and step outside our mental cage of this I and mine. Vivekananda says, all outgoing energy following a selfish motive is frittered away. It will not cause power to return to you. It will not cause power to return to you. But if restrained, it will result in the development of power. This self-control will tend to produce a mighty will, a character which makes a Christ or a Buddha. Karma yoga prevails in all of the four yogas. As I said, Bhakti Yoga, Karma Yoga, Raja Yoga, Jnana Yoga. Bhakti Yoga means to offer all of our work to our chosen ideal mentally. And it culminates first in work and worship, then it grows into the stage of work as worship, and finally culminates in the highest stage, work is worship. And if you ever have the grace to see a man or a woman of God performing karma yoga, it is something to behold. Raja Yoga means to use work as a means to develop concentration of mind. Yes. Karma Yoga and Raja Yoga is a means of thought control, self-control, and mindfulness. Meditation and renouncing the fruits of our meditations is also Karma Yoga. We should never say, I had a great meditation. No, no, no. If a meditation comes that's wonderful, it's grace. Karma Yoga. In that yoga, Karma Yoga is practicing the witness self, which is free from activity. It's a very difficult path to follow. Karma Yoga can also be a standalone yoga, as I mentioned. The principles, we work with non-attachment, and that non-attachment purifies the mind so that knowledge can dawn. Shiva Yoga means selfless service and can also include worship of the divine in all beings. The milestones in unfolding the secret of non-attached action are, first, we must learn to respect our work. Try to understand that every existing duty, when fulfilled, make us fit for higher duties. When we join the monastery or convent, we're given, the most menial jobs to do. And that is our training, to learn to do everything with an equal mind. When we do that which is ours to do, we shoulder responsibility, and that builds an inner strength. Furthermore, when we respect our work, no matter how menial, we begin to understand the value of work, the value of what we are doing here and now, what it can achieve, and also the relationship between our work and our self-development. Swami Vivekananda told the story in his book, Karma Yoga, of a young sadhu who went into the forest to practice yoga and meditation. Some of you have probably heard the story or read the story. And after years of practice, one day he was sitting under a tree and leaves were falling on his head. And he looked up and he saw a crow and a crane fighting in the tree. And he became angry. How dare they cause this inconvenience to me? And suddenly a flash of fire came out of his eyes and burnt the birds to ashes. What power, he thought. I can burn a crow and a crane by just a look. So he went into town to beg his food and stood outside a door. Mother, give me food, he called out. A voice came from inside the house. Wait a little, my son. The sadhu said, how dare that woman make me wait? She doesn't know my power. A voice came again from behind the door. Don't think too much of yourself. I'm neither crow nor crane. The sadhu was astonished. When at last the woman opened the door, he fell at her feet. Mother, how did you know what I had done? My boy, she said, I do not know your yoga or esoteric practices. I'm just a simple woman. I just made you wait because my husband is so ill and I was nursing him. Throughout my life, I've tried to do my duty, first to my parents and now to my husband. That is the only yoga I practice. But by doing my duty, I have become illumined. So I could read your thoughts and know your actions. Second, first, we must respect our work. Second, we must learn to like our work. Even those duties we're ambivalent towards or even dislike. We all know what those duties are. And when this happens, we jump over a mental hurdle and begin to work with greater concentration. And with increased concentration, the practice of karma yoga begins to work its magic on us. Our field of action provides the mental arena to cleanse the mirror of the mind that reflects our unconscious desires, which actually have been fueling our actions. We grow insight. Our mind becomes our teacher. And with that comes a sense of inner fulfillment, spiritual progress. We learn by doing. Swami Vivekananda has us look at the how of karma yoga and works to self-correct our inner attitude, and in doing so, refine our sense of self. He says, if you really want to judge the character of a man, look not at his great performances. Every fool may become a hero at one time or another. Watch a man do his most common actions. Those are indeed the things which will tell the real character of a great man. A disorganized mind creates confusion within oneself and for those around. Swami Vivekananda was a stickler for keeping everything in its proper place in the mind, just like Sri Ramakrishna was a stickler in his own habitat at Dakshineshwar. Nothing should be wasted. And humility, the ability to perform the most humble actions. Swami Vivekananda said, it is only work that is done as a free will, offering to humanity and to nature that does not bring any binding attachment. So that is karma yoga, a bold daily path of non-attachment, accruing power and purity while experimenting with reality itself. Yes, we're in the lab as we're working, no matter where we are. What spiritual attainments result from karma yoga alone? Swami Vivekananda echoed Vivekananda's views. In the Gita, Sri Krishna says that it is possible to attain liberation through work only. But in order to achieve this, one must have intense renunciation. All mental, physical, and spiritual energies must be concentrated. And when that is achieved through selfless service, a karma yogi's love for humankind grows to a state that sees unity in all. Yes. Then one serves the living God in all. Vivekananda. The moment I have realized God sitting in the temple of every human body, the moment I stand in reverence before every human being and see God in him, that moment I am free from bondage. Everything that binds vanishes, and I am free. What a high bar, and how accessible that is to all of us. Second, Sri Krishna says in the Gita, 4th chapter, verse 18, he who sees the inaction that is in action and the action that is in inaction is wise indeed. Now that's a spiritual puzzle. Vivekananda tells us this is the secret of work, to attain which is the goal of Vedanta, very high state, Jnana Yoga, to find in the greatest silence and solitude the intensest activity, and to navigate through heavily trafficked city streets with a calm and serene mind, as if in a soundless cave. That is the ideal karma yoga. Swami Vivekananda tells us when we come to that non-attachment, then we can understand the marvelous mystery of the universe, how it is intense activity and vibration, and at the same time, intensest peace and calm, how it is work every moment and rest every moment. That is the mystery of the universe. The impersonal and personal in one, the infinite and the finite in one. There's karma yoga in bhakti yoga. How does a bhakta strive to attain non-attached action? We consciously try to develop the attitude first that God alone is the doer. I am the instrument. And second, we learn to surrender the fruit of every action to God. What then are the methods? To develop the attitude that God alone is the doer and I am the instrument, we must try to feel that. It is one thing to say that, but quite another thing to feel that. Get inside the practice, because it is a spiritual state of consciousness. And by daily trying to feel that, we become more and more accustomed. We begin to get a sense of what that feeling is. Once, Sri Ramakrishna said to Girish, the famous dramatist, poet, renegade, as he himself had said, there was no sin he had not committed. He had told him, give me the power of attorney. How did this state of mind come about? One day, Girish asked Sri Ramakrishna, what spiritual practices should I practice? And Sri Ramakrishna at first said, keep to both this God and that, the world. Just try to think of him every morning and every evening. And Girish said, how can I think of him when I can't even remember to eat or sleep? My schedule is so busy. Girish knew that any obligation, rule, or vow would suffocate him until he broke it. We can all identify with Girish. We all understand what it means to have to limit ourselves. Sri Ramakrishna read Girish's mind and said, very well, if you cannot do that, remember him, meaning God, once before taking food and once before going to bed. And Girish said to himself, how could he obey that when his habits were so irregular? He was a genius in his field. Sri Ramakrishna looked at him, could tell by looking at his face, and he smiled. You will say, I cannot even do that. Very well then, give me your power of attorney. And immediately the master went into ecstasy. And Girish, he was delighted not to have to give up anything. Knowing Sri Ramakrishna had taken full responsibility for him and would somehow save him with his infinite power. But little did he know that the power of attorney put a noose around his neck 100 times stronger than any bondage of rules which he had considered unbearable. Henceforth, there was nothing that came into Girish's life, good or bad, joy or suffering, that he could do anything about, but would have to silently bear. Furthermore, one day when Girish said in the master's presence, I shall do this, Sri Ramakrishna immediately corrected him. Suppose you fail to do it. Rather, you must say, I shall do this if God will. In this way, Sri Ramakrishna's noose of love forced Girish to surrender his will to God. And by steadfastly holding on to this practice, Girish then began to feel Sri Ramakrishna was living within him as his inner guide, a kind of constant meditation, and he became a living saint. My teacher met him before he came to the West, and he used to tell us the story when he went to his house. Girish was dictating 3 different poems and plays. He had stenographers. He would pace the room and then would dictate, and then he would stop, ring a bell, and pace back and forth and continue. And he said that the home where Girish lived had such a strong spiritual atmosphere. This renegade had become a living saint. Through the blessings of Sri Ramakrishna and by practicing the power of attorney. So how does Bhakti Yoga transform our work into worship? By cultivating devotion itself. It's based on a psychological principle. When we love something or someone, we automatically think of that object of our desire. So by reversing this process, by actively thinking of God and intentionally creating, recreating, and deepening that samskara, that is how the thought of God grows into our desire and love for God. Swami Shivananda wrote in a letter dated October 30th, 1914, there is not any particular special method to call on God. Only try to love him. If you ask, how shall I love him? The answer is this. When you cannot stay without calling on him, without thinking of him, then only know that he is loving you. Puja is another method. Many of you probably perform puja in your house early in the morning or the arati in the evening. And when we perform puja, it begins initially as work and worship. Then it becomes transformed into work as worship, finally culminating as in work is worship. So how does karma yoga operate in all the four yogas? Karma yoga in itself, first of all, here the practitioner can be an agnostic or an atheist and work with detachment, with a desire to be free. Seva yoga can be an offshoot of karma yoga, selfless service, working for the good of humankind. And indeed, when our war vets were coming back to Vietnam, this mission impossible that was established for them to do service to others was really one of the only antidotes to the trouble in their lives and minds. They had a very, very difficult time readjusting to society from what they had seen and done in Vietnam. And this working selflessly for others was the only medicine. Worked. This selfless service, working for the good of humankind, that means without any pride and self-congratulation for being selfless. For us, it means worship of the divine in all beings, whether one's chosen ideal or the one self in all. We take that as our guiding light. Bhakti yoga is offering all work to our chosen ideal, culminating in work is worship. In Raja yoga, using work as a means to develop concentration of the mind. And those of you who are yogis and yoginis, you know how difficult that is. That is karma yoga. It's also a means of thought control, self-control, and mindfulness. Meditation and renunciation of the fruits of meditations is also karma yoga. And many do this, try to remember this in the morning at one's shrine, to offer everything to the Lord during the day, and at the end of the day to come back to one's seat of meditation, and at the end of one's visualization to wrap up all of one's karmas in the day, good and bad, and offer it at the feet of the Lord. Jnana yoga is karma yoga, the practicing of the witness self, which is free from activity. And what are the results? We see how karma yoga extends deep into our psychophysical being. It acts as a probe, the how we act and the why we react, until our minds are cleansed of all selfish motives and the bondage of ignorance disappears and our higher self manifests, whether Krishna consciousness, Buddha nature, or self-realization. We may not see the progress ourselves, but our family members and friends will. And they'll want to know what has brought you such happiness. Through selfless service, the karma yogi's love for humankind grows to a state that sees the unity in all and receives joy in serving the living God in all. So many of our centers started humanitarian service. First, in the West, we had many humanitarian service organizations. But then as we saw the homeless problem, our center started working at shelters, serving in kitchens to serve the homeless. It brought in a different dimension to our work in America. Third, A perfected karma yogi sees what Sri Krishna describes in the Gita, 4th chapter, verse 18, the inaction that is in action and the action that is in inaction. Vivekananda calls this the secret of work and the goal of Vedanta. To find in the greatest silence and solitude, in the intensest activity, and to navigate through the most active, intense activity with a calm, serene mind. Now, this sounds superhuman, but in fact, it's a state of yoga. Vivekananda assures us, when we come to that non-attachment, then we can understand the marvelous mystery of the universe. How it is intense activity and vibration, at the same time, intense as peace and calm, how it is work every moment and rest every moment. That is the mystery of the universe, the impersonal and personal in one, the infinite and finite in one. He's talking about Jnana Yoga, Advaita Vedanta, through work, through work. So these three attainments, freedom from bondage or self-realization, experience of serving the living God, and 3, seeing inaction in action and action in inaction, are attainable to the bhakta, the Raja Yogi, and the Jnani in pursuing the path of karma yoga, according to these 3 separate paths. To the Raja Yogi, work is a means to develop self-control. First, we try to understand the nature of the mind. And that means the science of the mind laid out in the Yoga Sutras. This we find in Raja Yoga, Vivekananda's Raja Yoga. Second, in practicing calming the lake of the mind, the meditation that Vivekananda gives us as pratyahara, by various techniques, we watch our thoughts, emotions, memories as contents of consciousness, objects completely separate from our true self. And again, with that practice, it drives home the realization that we have a mind, but we are not the mind. We're able to create counter thoughts to attenuate mental agitations. And what happens when we do that? Vivekananda tells us, if a man does evil to us, instantly we want to react. And we are not able to hold the chitta, meaning the mind stuff, the mind, the gross mind. It comes out in waves towards the object, and we lose our power. Each time we suppress hatred or a feeling of anger, it is so much good energy stored up in our favor that that piece of energy will be converted into higher powers. So every time we can do this, exercise that self-control, we are establishing a bank account of power within ourselves. Sri Ramakrishna utilized the yogic science of counter thoughts by taking this practice one step further, translating counter thoughts in the field of action. He trained himself and his disciples to perform the very thing that he and they were most resistant to doing. Sri Ramakrishna took tangible results of this Gita revelation as his sadhana. He took both money and clay in his hands, repeating rupee is clay and clay is rupee, until the attachment to money completely eradicated from his mind. It's a wonderful exercise. It's something that we can all do, not necessarily by taking clay and rupee, but anything else that we're tugging at. Work as a means to develop concentration and meditation is another example. Once the mind is calmed, the aspirant gathers the forces of the mind on the object of meditation within the heart. There's a wonderful example of this in our order. As I said, we're trained to perform the most menial tasks when we join as monastics. And one time, Swami Brahmananda wanted to test the monastics at Bellarmine. And so he had them peel a potato in the kitchen and bring it to him. They all came. He cast them aside, and finally one, Vishuddhananda, came with his potato, and Maharaj said, "This one has a yogic mind. See how no flesh was taken in with the skin." That is an example of working with complete concentration on a very menial task. Vivekananda said the first step, the preliminary step, is called Kriya Yoga. Literally, this means work, working towards yoga. The organs, and this is a wonderful, famous illustration, and it helps us to reorient ourselves. The organs are the horses. The mind is the reins. The intellect is the charioteer. The soul is the rider. The Atman is the rider, and the body is the chariot. The master of the household, Vivekananda tells us, the king, the self of man, is sitting in this chariot. If the horses are very strong and do not obey the rein, if the charioteer, the intellect, does not know how to control the horses, then the chariot will come to grief. But if the organs, the horses, are well controlled, and if the rein, the mind, is well held in the hands of the charioteer, the intellect, the chariot, reaches the goal. That illustration is a wonderful support. From Vivekananda's analogy of this body-mind complex, the rider being the Jivatma, awakened sense of the supreme self while in the world, the body is the chariot, the buddhi is the charioteer, the higher mind is the charioteer, the mind, the reins, and the sense organs, the horses. We can well understand why Swami Triyananda taught, when you serve, do it with all your heart and attention. Work of such quality is equal to prayer and meditation. And as I have said before, to see someone who is established in that practice is something to behold. So how does a Raja Yogi's Karma Yoga manifest? Skill and action. Swami Vijnanananda stated that wisdom lies in knowing how to use a tool properly. What does that mean? Whether the tool is an instrument, our hands, or our mind. How to use a tool properly. Swami Brahmananda said, one who is adept in self-control can do the work of 25 people. That's a high bar. If we analyze the different approaches to non-attached action, we see that Bhakti Yoga offers or surrenders, the Bhakti Yogi offers or surrenders action. The Raja Yogi remembers the self is separate from the buddhi, the higher mind, that holds the reins of the senses and organs of action. And in this way, Raja Yogi uses work to develop concentration, mindfulness, and self-control. Non-attachment purifies the mind so knowledge can dawn. To the Jnani Yogi, Karma Yoga is work without attachment. It's work with non-attachment, useful to orthodox followers of Jnana Yoga only as a preparatory step leading to Jnana Yoga. It purifies the mind, but is not used as a means to realization. And this is one of the revolutionary standoffs when the Ramakrishna order entered the Shankara Dasanami. In 1979, when I first went to India, those in the Shankara order, they remained within the mat. Their discipline was study and practicing the witness self. They didn't go outside. But the Ramakrishna order is different. And so for those orthodox, To them, the jnani attains the stage of self-realization through vichara, discrimination, on the nature of impermanence of this world, or self-inquiry. Who am I? This body, this mind, that is the practice, solely the practice. However, Vivekananda revolutionized this role of karma yoga in jnana yoga as practiced in the Ramakrishna Vedanta tradition, as we find in the Bhagavad Gita. He redefined its place and its utility in the path of jnana, as we shall see. The jnani as the self, he never acts. So there is no work to surrender or renounce. The jnani practices witness consciousness to remain established in the self, free from activity, the knower of the field, which is the body-mind complex. Sri Ramakrishna explained this attitude. God alone exists and is the doer. Unlike in bhakti and the Raja Yogis, wherein in the bhakti and Raja Yogis, wherein meditation itself is a form of karma yoga. For the jnani who is established in knowledge, meditation and self-inquiry are not karma yoga. What perfected karma yogi in karma, bhakti, and Raja Yogas experiences, jnana yoga practitioner adheres as practice. Sri Krishna describes in the Gita, 4th chapter, 18. Again, he who sees the inaction that is in action and the action that is in inaction is wise indeed. So Vivekananda calls this the secret of work and the goal of Vedanta. Vivekananda says when we come to that non-attachment, then we can understand the marvelous mystery of the universe, how it is intense activity and vibration, and at the same time, the intensest peace and calm. So how does that experience, seeing inaction and action, manifest in Jnana Yoga? Not by avoiding work. Sri Krishna, 3rd chapter, verses 4 and 5. Freedom from activity is never achieved by abstaining from action. Nobody can become perfect by merely ceasing to act. In fact, nobody can ever rest from his activity, even for a moment. Thoughts, see? Sensations, all of that is going on. All are helplessly forced to act by the gunas. So this freedom from activity is often misunderstood. Some aspirants think that to meditate on God without distractions, they must retreat from the world. Well, that's good. But those who try to escape usually don't progress in spiritual life. It's always good to go into solitude now and then on retreats. Yes, absolutely. But don't think that you're escaping the world, because where is the world? It's in the mind. We can't run away from the mind. We take it with us wherever we go. So what is the state of seeing inaction, and action in inaction? The aspirant knows that it is his or her prakriti that is acting. That is all. And what is this prakriti? Swami Prabhupada explained, knowing oneself to be the Atman, united with Brahman, one has no sense of being the doer of actions, but knows instead that it is the gunas that act. In this state comes the witness of all actions proceeding from oneself, whether physical or mental. Again, the Gita, chapter 13, verse 14, Krishna explains, doing the tasks of each sense, yet himself devoid of the senses, standing apart, he sustains. He is free from the gunas, but feels them. Again, Swami Prabhupada. In this passage, Sri Krishna conveys a beautiful meditation. Brahman is the witness of the function of the gunas. Because of his presence within us, our senses are active. We cannot blink our eyes without that presence, yet we think we are independent of God. Vivekananda said, "This is Jnana, who in the midst of the greatest silence and solitude finds the intensest activity, and in the midst of the intensest activity finds the silence and solitude of the desert. He has learned the secret of restraint. He has controlled himself. He goes through the streets of a big city with all its traffic, and his mind is as calm as if he were in a cave where not a sound could reach him, and he is intensely working all the time." That is the ideal of karma yoga. And if you have attained to that, you have really learned the secret of work. Swami Vivekananda founded the Ramakrishna mission to institute the practice of Seva Yoga, the binary path of Jnana Yoga, acknowledging his master's teaching to serve Jiva as Shiva, to serve the living God, worked, performed as worship of the one self in all. Vivekananda harnessed the non-dual goal of Jnana Yoga, knowledge, to the methodology of Karma Yoga. He fused those two yogas together, and he set Jnana Yoga in action through this selfless service. So herein, Karma Yoga is not does not act simply to purify the mind, but is a direct means to self-realization. In his Practical Vedanta, Part 2, Vivekananda states, "We want to worship a living God. I have seen nothing but God all my life, nor have you. To see this chair, you first see God, and then the chair in and through him. He is everywhere saying, 'I am.' The moment you feel 'I am,' you are conscious of existence. Where shall we go to find God if we cannot see him in our own hearts and in every living being? Thou art all that exists, a wonderful living God who is the only fact in the universe." In other words, through all of our senses, we cannot see without that self within. And what is that self? That consciousness, the chit of Satchit Ananda. Without that chit, this body-mind becomes inert, becomes dead. That is the first to see, and then our outer organs and our mind sees. Vivekananda foresaw this path of work as worship would bring joy to the giver, elevate the receiver physically, intellectually, and spiritually, and thereby serve the nation. And when I first went to India in '79, Swami Atmastananda was the Assistant General Secretary, and he was in charge of the relief work. And the stories he told were so inspiring. Yes, it does uplift not only the giver, but also the receiver. So the service in the Ramakrishna mission is a worship of unity and diversity, the same God, the higher self in all. Karma Yoga as Seva Yoga removes any false compartmentalization between the secular social service and the sacred self-realization. Our spiritual arena is, yes, our church, but also our workplace, our home, our every action. Vivekananda's concept of social service, socialization of the absolute, it unites the individual and the social goals. Spirituality becomes practical, and practicality is sanctified. Vivekananda, what is more practical than worshiping here? Worshiping you. I see you, feel you, I know you are God. The moment I have realized God sitting in the temple of every human body, the moment I stand in reverence before every human being and see God in him, that moment I am free from bondage. Everything that binds vanishes and I am free. Now imagine being in a lecture hall and having Vivekananda tell you that. You want to know what that felt like? There's a beautiful recording done by Swami Pravrajika of Lillian Montgomery, who attended Vivekananda's New York classes and lectures. And her description of what it felt like to be in his presence in a lecture hall is something to hear. And I think the tape is probably available on our Vedanta Society of Southern California website in its resources. So check it out. So this seva of the living God produced tangible transformative effects on character on those who were served. I'm going to end with a story. In the 1890s, Swami Akhandananda started education campaign in Khetri for the poor, famine relief in Murshidabad, and an orphanage in Sargachi. Vivekananda praised his brother monks. To a disciple, look what a great hero he is in work. He is unaware of fear and death, and doggedly does his work for the good of many and for the welfare of all. It is true, power comes through practicing austerities. Again, working for others is also austerity. The practice of austerity intensifies altruistic feelings in an aspirant and actuates him to unselfish work. So also, the pursuit of work for the sake of others purifies the heart, and that leads him to the realization of the Supreme Atman. So this is the ideal of Seva Yoga. For some, complete self-forgetfulness in worship. For others, it becomes the Sarva Mukti ideal. In a July 3rd, 1897 letter to Mary Hale, Vivekananda divulged his feelings. May I be born again and again and suffer thousands of miseries so that I may worship the only God that exists, the only God I believe in, the sum total of all souls, and above all, my God the wicked, my God the miserable, my God the poor of all races, of all species, is a special object of my worship.